So, first question, Peyman Mohammadi, aka Pey.Pey33, why does the internet love you?
Well, that's a good question. I wish I could tell you why. But I guess the authenticity and people can resonate with stuff I do on the internet, and I'm not really trying that hard. The whole thing started as a hobby, and now it became a passion. I really love what I do on social media, and I feel like it's a vessel to communicate my inner thoughts, things that you would usually not communicate, or people would judge you for communicating them. And I created this safe zone where one of my biggest fears was to get some hate comments or people judging you. But I don't know why on my page none of that happens. People are very supportive. So I guess people feel safe and they can resonate.
I came across Pey.Pey33 because I was not big on social media. So you came across my feed at some point and I thought, look at this happy guy, right? He's just so happy, and you can't fake it. Of course, you're positioning the camera and you're putting up a really nice quote. That same quote doesn't come alive if someone's not dancing and swinging the handkerchief. But the reason why I reached out to you was, as I said in my email, I started this podcast 6 months ago. It's a passion project for me. So I just email people and say, hey, I would love to have a conversation with you about X. And it can be a rape victim talking about faith. It can be a former NFL player turned love coach talking about rage. Posted something where you were lying on the concrete and the rain is coming down, and you said, don't tell God how big your storm is, tell the storm how big your God is. But your energy was different than in any other post you had ever put that I had seen. So I thought, okay.
Some trauma here, let's talk.
So I emailed you and said, I think I'd love to have a conversation about starting over. And to my surprise, you replied right away. Why?
So I get emails and DMs about stuff like that all the time. I don't know what it was about your email that just got my interest, and I read it and I looked through some of your podcasts. First of all, I felt very honored that you even asked me. But secondly, I think I'm for the first time in my life in this place of peace where I feel comfortable enough to talk about all of these things. There's a reason why I don't call myself Peyman on social media. I call myself Pey.Pey. I created this persona that was shielding me from too much.
Yeah.
And now I feel like, you know what? It's about time to share a little more about myself and why I got to the place I got. Because if I can do it, everybody can. And I think that's why I saw this as an opportunity to really talk about things I've never talked about.
Lots of people romanticize the idea of going viral overnight and becoming an internet personality. But have you ever considered how scary it might really be to have a worldwide following of people who think that they know you? Pey.Pey33 has been a mystery wrapped in a soundtrack, twirling a handkerchief over his head while dancing through life across the world on TikTok and Instagram to the delight of his some 800,000 followers for years. But today, the mystery is over, starting with his real name. Meet Peyman Mohammadi. He's ethnically Afghani, was raised in Germany, and is finally ready to share his story with the world. From a very conservative childhood to the 14-year relationship that defined much of his life before the pandemic. From the early loss of his father to the years when he cared for his mom as she descended, sadly, into dementia, to the legacy of being the only brown kid in a small-town German classroom along with his twin brother, to finally landing in New York, where on some deep level he feels like he belongs. Peyman is ready to share who he is and who he hopes to become. The depth that underlies this happy-go-lucky dancing video persona is much more palpable in real life. He is a gentle soul. Let's all hope he just keeps dancing. So much of it is coming into yourself. It's funny because with social media generally, I have a love-hate relationship like most people do. So in my house, my children would tell you that mommy thinks social media is the devil because I've told them they'll get phones when they're 16 and social media when they're 25. But I'm in this world as a podcaster meeting folks like you where it's starting to become clear that people can use social media to allow themselves to finally kind of come out with their whole personality and test how the world receives it. And it's scary. It's really, really scary. So let's start from the beginning with you, right?
Sure.
You, and I didn't know this, you're Afghani and raised in Germany. How did that happen?
Well, I am, and that's also something that I think I was struggling for a long time, because Germany is a little different than the US. And identifying or being raised in Germany, it's not that if you tell people you're German, they always have this follow-up question, oh, where are you actually from? So you never feel like the others. So I was raised in a very small village. Me and my twin brother, we were the only brown kids, probably almost in the entire school. So I always felt very different than everyone else. And so being an immigrant in this small village, my parents obviously were working full-time, so it was me and my brother against the school. And so at that point, I just always felt this urge to prove myself and to make sure that I am one of the others. I always wanted to be part of something, part of the group, part of the class, part of the society. And I think that was the cause of a lot of struggles that I had. But yeah, it was tough. I love the country. I do feel still very connected to Germany, but there is obviously a reason why I came to the US, because at some point I just knew it's not my country. Although my family is there, all my friends are there, I don't know anything else besides Germany. It's not a country that I can identify with. So I started to go on this journey. I was traveling a lot. I was living in other countries because I felt like I didn't find home yet.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the journey of me coming to New York started.
And it's so funny. You know, this whole idea of figuring out where you belong in this day and age, I gave a keynote speech called Outsiders on the Inside to talk exactly about this, where like I'm Indian, I was born and raised here. And it wasn't until I went to college that I figured out why so many Indians felt so outside in the U.S. When you grow up in New York, it's very different than if you grow up in Indiana in the 80s and 90s and whatever it is, right? And I don't know the nature of the town you grew up in, but so much comes down to sort of the story that you're telling yourself about why people are reacting the way that they are, and then also what you need to do to overcome it. So where did you go? Did you go sports, like toxic masculinity all the way? Did you go like, I'm just going to punch that guy in the face and like establish dominance like a prison yard? Like, what did you do?
No, my safe zone was to be the best kid I could have been to my parents. So I was a home kid. I was not going out a lot. I was abiding by the rules. My parents were very strict. So I felt safe following the rules because I had no control outside, so I needed control inside. And I knew at my home we had like very strict rules. We were eating every dinner at the dining table. We had strict rules on when to come home. And that gave me, now thinking about it, a little bit of security that I needed, because there were instances where I was in second grade, me and my twin brother, and he was more at that time more of the extrovert that didn't play by the rules. I was the opposite. But we were always together. So we were punished for everything because we were those brown kids that I remember one time my brother forgot his homework, and my teacher at that time, she was not a nice lady, let's just put it that way. I still know her name. I still know exactly how she looks because she was so traumatic for those 4 years of my life, not only for me, even for my brother. So she took his backpack and just spilled it, and everything fell on the floor, and she was in front of the entire class. It was very humiliating for him, and because I'm an empath and he's my twin brother, I felt horrible about it. And she just told him, like, during this class, just fix your backpack, and we'll continue with the class. So this poor kid was standing there by himself, trying to like get his stuff from the entire room. And I just sat there and I didn't know what to do, because the problem is, okay, sure, I go home, I'll tell my parents. They're not doing anything about it. Their German was at that point not that good. And they also had that kind of learning of a teacher is the person that is always right. So you probably did something that was not right.
Respect the authority.
Exactly. And the whole racism and adjustment was not a topic that I was thinking about at that time. So I just felt very insecure, and I always thought something is probably coming and I'm doing something wrong. So that was my entire childhood of trying to always be perfect to prevent that. I never wanted to be in that position.
To not, it's ironic because basically you spend your whole childhood in that kind of situation trying not to get the light to shine on you.
Correct.
And here we are with all the light shining on you, right?
1,000. That's actually
It's
a
beautiful.
Good, yeah.
It's really beautiful. There was an interview I did for the podcast with a woman named Melissa Petro. The reason I bring it up is because your brother was being humiliated.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that she was trying to teach him a lesson, but this woman, Melissa Petro, was a New York City school teacher. She was doing her thing, and one day she wrote a small 700-word op-ed piece in the Huffington Post, and it said, Craigslist is thinking about taking down its sex services page, and I do not believe it should be taken down. And the reason I do not believe it should be taken down is because I was a sex worker on Craigslist for how many ever months, years, whatever it was.
Wow.
So she wrote this article. She thought she was doing something good. This was her belief. Some reporter connected her name on that article to the New York City Department of Education, and figured out she was a public school teacher in elementary school at the time. She was vilified, she was humiliated in every magazine, and she was fired by the Department of Education. Gloria Allred represented her and everything.
Wow.
Now she has come out 10 years later with a book called Shame, How to Be a Woman in the Age of Mortification, but she makes this point about the difference between embarrassment and humiliation. And humiliation leads to shame, but humiliation in particular is about understanding there is an injustice being done to you, that someone is actively taking something you don't want the world to see and showing it.
Yeah.
So that's intense.
It is intense. It is intense. Also, it is even more intense being raised in a brown household. We have this Dari Farsi saying, "Mardum chimega." That the translation of that is, "What would people say?" And that was the motto of my life. So everything you did was based on if people were to prove it. The way you dress, the way you talk, the way you act, what do you do as a second or third step in your education, it's always about if people would approve. And that's something that it's very difficult to unlearn that because it's in your DNA. I still to this day sometimes think, oh, is that like the right decision? Can I do this or not? Because, yeah, that was what I was being taught.
And by the way, this is how society functions, so it's not all wrong. It's not like your parents got it wrong, right? They're also doing their best, but they're trying to fit in a particular society. So wait, tell me the phrase.
Mardom chimega?
Mardom chimega.
Correct.
So in Hindi, we have a phrase that I've taught my kids already, which is sharam ne aata.
Oh.
Sharam is shame.
Shame, yeah.
Sharam ne aata hai is basically not
you don't
even.
Have any shame?
It's not even. It's almost like shame doesn't occur to you.
Oh, wow.
It's like
very passive aggressive.
You're above shame. Sharam ne aata hai? Like, what is wrong with your constitution as a human that sharam ne aata hai, right?
Correct.
To you.
Correct.
But it's beautiful that it stays with you after all these years.
It does. It does.
But let's talk more about your parents. So your parents came over to Germany. How
Correct.
and when?
So my dad was a businessman in Afghanistan. Then he had a hotel in Germany, and he was traveling back and forth. And at some point, late 80s, they were decided, okay, maybe the political situation in Afghanistan is not the best. It was during the Soviet Union. The country was changing, and they decided to leave the country because they felt something is changing drastically in the country. He could travel to Germany because he was working here, but we couldn't come with him. It was a complicated process, so we could fly to Prague.
Okay.
So that was the legal route, but we could not enter Germany. So I was a 7-month-old child, me and my brother. My sisters were also very little. And we had this group of people who all tried to flee and like basically cross the border illegally from Prague to Berlin, Germany. And my mom still tells me until this day that it was a very traumatic experience for her because her husband was not present. She was by herself with these small children, me and my brother. 2 babies and 2 little girls. And so it was winter, it was cold. So she told us that at some point they were about to pass the border, but they had to be very quiet because obviously they don't want to be caught. And me and my brother were hungry. So we were crying and crying. And the guy that was basically the smuggler, he got nervous because it was very loud. So he looked at my mom and he said, either you will shut him down or I will. And that was the moment where my mom realized, yeah, not with me. I'm not that kind of person. So she sat down. She was like, I will make a scene. I will get us all caught. I don't really care if you say that one more time. I'm ready to go back to Afghanistan. I had a great life. Let's do it.
Badass.
So he then panicked, and she was very loud and made a scene. And at some point, he apologized for this, and he's like, it's fine. Just please make sure they don't cry. Let's move, keep moving. And we arrived in Berlin, and there were a bunch of taxis waiting for us, like 10 taxis, and because they had to rush, everybody was just distributed in some random taxis. My mother was with me and my brother, but my two sisters ended up in another taxi. Oh my God. So for that 1 hour, she was feared for her life. She didn't know where the taxis are going, where her daughters will be ending up. And it was very traumatic and drastic, but thankfully an hour later we arrived in this small village in Germany all together. And I think she could breathe again. But now when she talks about it, she makes it seem like it's not that big of a deal.
Of course.
But I know it was, and it still is. But I think that's the summary of our culture. We just don't talk about our traumas because we think they will go away, and they will end up getting to you.
Well, I'm going to make a distinction. It is horribly traumatizing what she went through. It's horribly traumatizing. It's not funny. It's not okay. And also, I'm sure looking back on it, she's thinking, if the weather had been different, if the wind had blown a different way, maybe I would have responded to that man differently. Mm-hmm. You don't know as a mom what's going to happen until that moment. I gave birth under lockdown to my second child, and I had what felt like a near-death experience, and I was in the New York Times, and she's now 4.
Wow.
And the other day she said, Mama, what's lockdown? It's like, I mean, I gave birth.
Wow.
It was not okay.
No
it was
visitors,
it was a
nothing.
wartime experience. Yeah, I was alone for 4 days in the hospital. I almost bled out after my C-section. It was horrific. But I think about how I will tell my children about it, because after now 4 years, there's this desire to put the horrible things behind you. So it's not even cultural, it's actually survival. And it's not like someone almost stole my daughters. At this exact moment, my daughter is in preschool, and there is a Apple tracker in her coat. Because if they take her to the wrong park, I will know.
Yeah.
And this is in New York City, so no, that's really intense. So one more question about that. So when they were smuggling you across the border, were you smuggled on foot? Were you smuggled in cars through a checkpoint?
No, it was on foot. We had to cross the border on foot just to make sure, because once you enter the country, we have this law in Europe, or in Germany in this case, wherever you register as a refugee, that counts. So we had to make sure that we stepped foot in Germany. So that's why it was so important to not be caught in Prague, but basically in a different country, because that would be the country that we would have ended up. So yeah, we were smuggled by foot.
So the point of entry had to be Germany, otherwise you wouldn't be with your dad.
Correct.
Oh my God.
Also, now when I think about it, obviously I love my dad to the moon and back, but it was also a big thing that he, now being an adult man, that he didn't join us.
Was he able to?
He could have.
What would have been the logistics of that? I don't know.
So he had a legal reason to be in Germany, so there was no reason for him to get smuggled over the border. But obviously there is a risk of him losing his visa after that. So I think that was the reason why he didn't. But still, now thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know if I would do that. But again, different times and different rules. But it's still like his wife, his children.
Four children and his wife.
Correct.
Who had left Afghanistan before or no?
No.
I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Or maybe, because there is only the story that we tell ourselves, maybe the story is he knew what a badass his wife was.
Yeah, that's
Could be that?
Could be that because my mom was a badass.
Can we
and
decide that
still
that's
is.
the
Yeah,
story?
let's stick with that.
Stick with
It
that.
sounds better, yes.
Oh, wow. So then you're growing up in Germany.
Yes.
So from your earliest age.
I did. I don't know anything else in Germany, so I've never went back to Afghanistan. So that's why it's been weird because I identify as a German. I speak German. I would consider it as my first language, but I was never a German. So to anyone else, wherever I was a foreigner. And
Do you really feel like you're not a German? Because, like, okay, similar situation. Ethnically, I'm not some white guy from North Carolina, right? I walk around and still to this day, my entire life, people, where are you from? No, but where are you really from? No, but where are you really from? And I just say, New York. Did I stutter? If you can't ask me the question correctly, unless you can say, what is your ethnicity, you're going to hear New York. And then if you keep repeating it, I'm going to say, N-E-W-Y-O, because I just don't have the patience for that lack of, I don't know, worldliness, if you're trying to talk to me. But I still do feel American, and I think that the reason I do, I've examined this a lot, is because I grew up with a huge Indian community here. So if you have a huge Indian community, and then you have access to everything that's going on around you, you don't necessarily feel like an outsider. There'll be a couple of racist comments here and there. As a child, I've been told, go back to my country, and I remember looking at the lady and saying, huh? You know, like I didn't, the moment when you realize people are racist, the moment when you realize people look at you and your blonde best friend Lindsay and don't understand, you know? But it never made me feel like an outsider. What do you think it was about Germany? Or do you think it was the fact that it was such a small town? It could have been anywhere.
No, I think it's overall the country. America just did a better job in adjusting and making people feel part of the country. I think there's this one example. If you get the U.S. citizenship, I think it's like a whole big celebration.
Yeah.
If you have to swear on like I think you have to do an oath, and people will congratulate you, and it's basically this big step, and everybody will acknowledge it as a big step.
True.
In Germany, it's none of that. It's passing a test, and then you get a document. There's no celebration connected to it. And I think that just shows you, it's a good example on how people see the German citizenship. The German citizenship is more of a vessel of, hey, we accept you now, you can do whatever you want, you have the rights that everybody else has. Whereas in America is, you're an American.
You're an American.
You are an American. And that's how I felt. So
yeah.
In New York, I'm here for 8 months now, I feel more of a New Yorker than I felt in Germany as a person from Germany.
Oh, you're wearing the cap.
I do, right? So I'm representing.
Should we tell people why you're wearing the cap today?
No, we shall not.
Okay,
no.
that's a secret. They don't need to know what color your hair is under the cap.
Exactly. No, we can tell. I got a haircut, and it does not look cute. So this is it for now.
All right. Well, I didn't get a haircut for this. But thank you for being my very first in real life, in studio, face-to-face podcast guest.
This is amazing. I love it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell me more. Was it a very conservative childhood, or was it that blended childhood where you have the conservative but you also have all the freedom?
Yeah, no, it was a very conservative childhood. I think it's connected to how I felt most secure. So yes, I was raised in this little town in Germany with 36,000 people living there. I felt very special in a good and in a bad way. The good way was that everybody was very surprised about my German skills and how I was like the others. So I was being called out for that for it all the time. Like, oh my God, your German is so great. And
yeah, I've been told, oh really, you don't even have an accent. And I'm always like, on what planet are you from?
Yeah, so that was the common theme. But it also made us as a family closer because we were our allies, me, my siblings, my extended family that lived in that village. So everybody was very close to each other. And I think that's how we were raised in a very traditional way. My two sisters, older sisters, they got married quite young. And me and my brother were the only two boys left in the household. And the good thing about my parents, they did not really make a difference between girls and boys. Whatever they couldn't do, we couldn't do.
I love that.
So when my friends had like sleepovers, or they were going partying at 17 or drinking. We couldn't do any of that.
Oh, wow.
And my mom, as you said, was a badass. So she knew everything at all times, and there was no bullshit with her. And she, in the best respectful way, I was so afraid of her.
Good. As a mom, I'm just going to say good.
That's why I think all of us turned out well, I would guess. I would say, because when I look at my siblings and my sisters and my brother in particular, I am so proud of us, the way we turned out, the way we individually constructed our lives, because there was a lot of things happening because, again, being raised in Germany, having all these difficulties, also your parents going through difficult times together was sometimes not the easiest, but somehow we made the best out of it, because if I look at my siblings or if I look at myself, I would like my children to be like that. So,
that's a big deal to be able to say that. I saw something recently where someone said that the new generational wealth is having been raised in a peaceful family.
Yeah.
And it's 100% true.
Yeah.
I was raised in a peaceful family, not a perfect family, but there's a big difference. And there's actually power in the struggle. There's power in seeing what your mom and dad got wrong, seeing them negotiate, apologizing to each other. And in a close family, you actually see that as children, and then seeing them negotiate a new country, seeing them negotiate their own perspective on racism and on all of these things, and knowing even as a child that what they're telling you may not even be what they believe.
Yeah.
You develop such a deep level of respect for your parents. So I think, if anything, in our generation, are we in the same generation? We're somewhat close to the same
Yeah, we
generation?
are. I would say yes.
First generation in a country other
Correct.
than where you look like you would have
Correct.
been born. I think that's the kind of generational wealth.
Yeah.
And, it's funny. You're making me think of all this stuff. So my son, I'm divorced and amicable in co-parenting and all that, but there's a lot of differences between households in
Yeah.
terms of the way that, the expectations and this and that. So I think about this all the time, that what is an assumption for me in terms of what I expect of my kids, how I speak to them, etc., it lands so easily with them because structure provides comfort. And even if it's too much structure, children appreciate that more than anything else, even if they're in the midst of saying you're the worst.
Yeah.
They're saying it and they're like, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
Right? Right?
That's true. And as a child, all you want to do is feel safe. That could mean anything. In my case, obviously, parents go through things, and I always felt like my mom needs a soldier on her side because she was there by herself. Her entire family was not living in Germany. So it was basically her in-laws, which is my dad's side. And I always, even when I was little, I remember that I always felt like she needs a bigger support system. And at some point, I just wanted to be that. So this savior complex was established when I was very young. It started with my mom, and then it went on with a lot of other people. But I had the urge to save people. And starting with my mom, I knew that she also would appreciate that. And she showed me, obviously, that this was something that she did appreciate. But I feel like whatever you experience as a child or whatever you go through will determine so many things for your adulthood. And that's why it is so important to have this healthy relationship with your parents. And I always say, when I see sometimes those German kids that were raised in this small village in Germany with all their uncles and aunts and grandmas, and they were like those big heroes of the family. They couldn't do anything wrong. Those were in my case, when I saw them as adults, the most confident, healthy people. They didn't care about failing in university or going through. They were just happy with whatever happened. And it stems from that very big security of they never felt this loneliness or this fear of failing because they had such a very strong upbringing. So therefore, whenever I have children, I just want to make sure they feel safe with whatever that means. Sure, structure is great, rules are great, but I just want to make sure that they feel good about whatever happens in their life.
I did a lot of research, not on you because there's nothing to find about you.
Yeah, that's true.
But on divorce before I decided to get one. And one of the things I read that stayed with me was that in fact, in order to have the healthiest possible sense of self, what a child needs is not necessarily two parents of any kind in the same household. What a parent needs is one completely steadfast, totally emotionally stable parent. Anything else going on around them, and by the way, that could happen in a household with one stable and one unstable parent as well, right? But you don't realize that, you don't think about it. And many years ago, I wrote a book. I'm an author, and I've written 4 books that also nobody's ever heard of. One of them was called Chasing Success, and I interviewed 13 Harvard alumni who were really successful entrepreneurs all around the world, and who don't typically give interviews, but I guess I'm good at bugging people into saying yes. But I was far too young to be writing this book. I was like 22 when I wrote this book. But I got to travel around the world and interview all these fascinating people. I also met with their college roommate, their wife, their husband, their first investor, their high school best friend who told me embarrassing stories about them. It was such a fun experience, way before podcasts existed. And what I came up with was a theory of what I call the psychological safety net, that entrepreneurs who become wildly successful don't just keep trying because they have something to prove. The ones who become wildly successful are more often than not wildly successful because their inability to give up is tied to their belief that one failure doesn't define them, because they are already defined by something like a psychological safety net. And that safety net was not the same for everyone, but they all had one. For some of them, it really was that solid childhood. For some of them, it really was, you know, they came from this horrible background, but then they got into Harvard. They were never going to let it go. They had that one thing, that psychological safety net.
Some financial stability, something.
No, the trust fund didn't do it. The trust fund didn't do it.
Oh, wow.
Because that's not about you.
Okay,
that's about believing you'll always have food and a roof. Trust funds are great, but that's about a food and a roof. This is about psychological safety net that nobody can ever take away from you, because you can't keep swinging. And many of these people had launched 3, 4 companies and gone broke so many times before the one that really took off. And the differentiating factor was they kept swinging because of that safety net. So you got yours.
That's,
from your family.
That's very, very interesting. I've never viewed it like that, but
Your siblings, your brother in particular, because you're twins, and your sisters, although I assume they had a different experience. Do you think they reacted the same way to growing up in Germany, to having that outsider feeling while there?
Not sure about my sisters, but I'm definitely certain about my brother, because we spoke about this. But he had a different way of probably dealing with it, because he was a more uncomplicated child. He was into sports. He had a million friends, so he didn't really show his trauma or his the reaction to things that happened. But afterwards, I could tell, because he is doing very well in life, and recently just brought up the name of that teacher. And wait, her name is Miss Kapelush, and you know who you are. So he randomly brought up her name, and I didn't think about her name for years. So we talked about it, and that was the first time we actually had an exchange about the things that happened when we were a child. And then he brought up a couple of things that I didn't remember. And it was so many things, and she basically just broke us down as those children that will never make it. So she told him, I didn't know that, I didn't remember. She told him, per se, you will never make it.
Flat out.
Yeah, flat out, as a child. And when he was, some years ago, he always had the urge to go back to that school and just show her that he made it, just to prove a point. And my brother is not like that. My brother is very low-key. He doesn't care like that. He doesn't like drama. But that really bothered him.
That was a direct humiliation. Everybody's like that.
It was, yeah. So we did talk about that. It bothered him, I know that, but he has this beautiful life right now. I don't think he thinks about it a lot at this point, but he has 2 little children, 2 little boys, and I think he just want to make sure that they are good. They will be treated nicely, and you can just feel it with those 2 little boys. They have the confidence, and at some point, it's maybe not all bad, because me and my brother, we really wanted to prove a point. I always had this urge to prove that I can do this, because I maybe secretly never really believed in myself, so I needed to prove it to myself. I'll get to this college or get get this degree, at that point, I will feel good about myself. And then just went on and on and on. I still don't. So at some point, I kind of understood, oh, maybe it's not all the achievements that I'm actually doing or getting. It's how I feel and how I view myself. But in the beginning, I did not understand that. I just thought if I get to this point, same with my followers. If I get to 50K followers, I will feel so good about myself.
Yeah.
No. If I get to 100,000 followers, that will change everything. And now at 300,000 followers, I don't feel any different.
Yeah.
And that just proves me and shows me that at some point you have to work on yourself and find out what really, really makes you feel that way and change that narrative instead of going for the next big thing because you don't want to feel numb.
But see, this is where our generational difference shows. I'm 47. 25 years ago, I took a year and traveled the world alone telling people my name was Sarah. There was no social media. Maybe I would be Pey.Pey33, Poo.Poo33, something like that, right?
Sarah 33, yeah.
Sarah 33, right? But I grew up at a time when any of the self-discovery was private, and because there were benefits to it being private, there's a lot of, nobody will ever know.
Definitely.
But there were also drawbacks to it because the fact that you're going through this phase of your life and you're deciding to open yourself up to self-exploration means you're going to get inbound information and connections that you wouldn't have otherwise had if you were doing it back in my day, because you just did it and nobody heard you, right? You know what I mean? If you ended up having a great conversation with that guy in that bar in Barcelona and learning a great story, just for example.
For example, not out of
staying
reality.
Up all night
sure,
on a
sure.
beach in an island
Sarah.
that used to be inhabited by cannibals and learned something interesting and drank the kava.
Wait, what is the name of this gentleman in
couldn't feel
Barcelona?
half your face. Who knows, right?
Is it maybe? We'll find out.
But it all came down to happenstance. It wasn't like there was any optimal way to grow. There is an optimal way to grow now because the benefit of what you're doing, I think for you, is you're actually genuinely exploring and seeking.
Yes.
You're doing this for yourself. Yes, you have a great following and everything, but I can tell within 2 minutes of meeting you, that's not your intention. Like you're trying to be famous, right? I think you're just genuinely enjoying this, and you're like, wow, people get a kick out of what I'm doing.
Correct.
So I think it would feel scary because fame and notoriety brings a whole can of worms. And I think when you say 50,000 would have felt good, 50,000 felt good, but maybe it felt confusing. 100,000 would feel good. Maybe it felt good, but also a little scary. 200,000, 300,000, whatever. Maybe now there's that other side of notoriety, and it's scary.
That, and also, so I'm still struggling with being okay with who I am as a person, and now portraying this person online and helping so many people with my little videos. And then what's the scariest if I meet people in person, like people that recognize me on the street and they want to say hi, I feel the urge to be my best self so I can represent what they think I am. Not that I'm not that person, but I just sometimes don't, although I feel like I'm very confident with specific elements of my life, I lack confidence with who I am sometimes, and my vessel is to express myself through social media. So when I see someone, I feel like an imposter because I feel like, oh, I really have to make sure that this person thinks I am that person online. So I say things differently or I just act differently just to make them happy. And that is something obviously that I didn't know before because this whole social media thing is new to me. And it's also a little scary because that just opens up more things that you didn't know about yourself.
That's what I'm saying. You would have otherwise never known that you'd be afraid to step out of the frame.
Yeah.
Because basically you're in the frame in these people's pockets. And
Correct.
then they see you on the street and you're thinking, what, you have to be smiley, you have to be gentle, you have to be insightful, you have to be funny, you have to be in a good mood.
Yeah, losing control. Because everything I do online is I'm the producer, I'm the actor, I'm the screenwriter. I have full control and power of the narrative. Once I meet someone in person, whether it's someone that knows me from social media or I just meet someone through friends and they told them how funny and great I am, it gets me this pressure of performing. And so I sometimes completely forget to have fun because I just want to be the person that they think that I am. And that is an unlearning and an unpacking. First of all, why do I think that? And second step, how can I unlearn this?
If you ever manage to totally unlearn it, let me know. I'll sign up for that course. Because I'm in perimenopause and I haven't unlearned it, but I think it would be the biggest accomplishment of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this can be a huge personal growth thing for you.
Definitely, and there's a reason why, for instance, one step towards that was to leave my family and my friends and to move to a different continent, because my old self would have never done that.
So here's the thing. You said, like, whether you accept yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But is it accepting yourself, or is it revealing your complete self to people?
Ooh.
Do you not accept yourself?
To be honest, that's actually a very good point. I think I do accept myself.
Good.
No, you made a good point. It took me a while, but I think at this point I do accept myself. But yeah, you're right. Revealing myself and showing others who this Pey.Pey or Peyman really is, I think that's the scary part.
Would this help?
No. Yeah. No, this helps. Coffee.
Does it help? All right.
Coffee.
I mean, there's a lot of things that happened, right? For you to go from living in a small town to traveling around the world,
Mm-hmm.
shaking the handkerchief. Tell me about dating in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and then where that led you.
Yes, so dating is a complicated topic, because I would say I was a very simple person, because all I saw with my sisters or my brother, they all had one person that they dated in life. My mom had only my father, my sisters had only their husbands,
Wow.
and my brother had only his girlfriend, now wife, and mother of his kids. So
that was a plan.
But maybe a plan, maybe not, because I met my now ex when I was 16. And because of the environment that I grew up, and I just jumped into this, at that point I really thought, and I still think, it was a very deep love that I felt. We were together for 14 years, so it was until I turned 30. But now, thinking about how I actually felt in that relationship just tells me a lot about myself. I found another security blanket. I felt secure. I felt safe in that relationship. I didn't need to do other things, which is probably another trauma response, because that's how I was raised and that's how I felt in my childhood. I always needed to something that makes me safe. In that particular case, it was the relationship. So it was a great relationship. I have no regrets. I'm very happy and thankful that I experienced real love like that. Also, growing up together, having different cultures. She was not from my cultural background. It was something that just taught me so much, and taught me things about myself, taught me things about how I am with others. But at some point, I think we both knew this is not good for any of us, but we were too scared to admit it. So towards the end, it was just not a healthy or good relationship anymore. And once we both accepted it and we separated, I feel like my healing journey started. Up until then, I always had this feeling of I have to perform as a boyfriend, fiance, as a son, as a brother, as a part of society. I just thought what others would think of me, and that's how I'm going to live my life. Even in the relationship, I did a lot of things because I thought she would like this. Not
Like, what does a good boyfriend do?
Correct. So I should like these kind of things. I should go for this business. I should never have social media. I never had social media before. So I did everything based on what I think a good boyfriend would do, or a good fiance. Once we separated, I felt like a no one. I lost my identity, some sort of.
Really? The relationship was that core?
The relationship was my identity. It was me, her, that's me, that's the relationship. And it was during COVID. I remember it was 2020. It was right before my 30th birthday, and the world shut down. Nothing was happening. I was stuck at home, and then this breakup happened. And now thinking about it, it was a blessing, but also a curse at the same time.
Good timing, right?
It was kind of good and very bad timing because I had nothing to distract myself. And that was the hardest part. I wanted to be distracted. I wanted to travel. I wanted to go out with my friends. I wanted to do things I've never done, but I couldn't. So I was stuck at home with my thoughts and my feelings and my trauma and my sadness. So probably for a good 6 months, I was just not myself. My family, they were asking questions. I didn't want to talk about it.
Oh, they were thinking you were going to get married. You're 30. You were turning
1,000%.
30.
And
Yeah.
they also thought this is not serious.
Even though she's not Afghani.
Yeah, they
But
they
you had
loved
been
her.
together
Yeah,
forever.
they loved her. That is no, but what I mean, this is not serious. The breakup is not serious.
Oh,
they will
it's
get
not
over
gonna
it.
stick.
It's not that because I never spoke about it. So I had the moment. Probably 3 months after the breakup, my sisters came to my apartment. I was outside barbecuing. My oldest sister, she just looked at me and she's like, "So Peyman, is this for real?" And I just looked at her. I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And she never asked one follow-up question. And that's why I love these people so much, because she understood in that moment, I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
This is too deep. I'm not ready to talk about it. But she knew that I am stable enough to make my own decisions and I don't need any consultation. It was an amazing time. I had an amazing relationship for the longest time. I wanted to respect that, although towards the end a lot of things happened that I didn't like. But it was still a great time of my life, and I wanted to give that the respect it needed to have. So I just chose it as an opportunity to not look at the relationship or her, but look at me and what I can do and what I can change about myself to get out of this. So that's when I think this new chapter of my life literally started, where I thought about myself, thought about my deepest feelings, my fears, and I started to unpack them day by day.
And I think there's a lot you don't want to talk about, and I understand that because being divorced myself and having 2 small kids who have told me that they will one day read every book I've written and listen to every podcast I've ever done and look at, they think they're going to know everything about their mom. They're not going to know. But they're determined to know. And so my point is to say, I understand wanting to respect the impact of the information on other people.
Correct.
But your followers are going to watch this, and they're going to say, who lost that big hunk of man? Or whatever. I don't know. I'm going to make up their
Nobody
comments,
lost
right?
anything. It was
Or what, whatever. So there's a piece of it that they can be like an easy conclusion, which is you're not the same at 16 as you are at 30.
Correct.
And I fell in love so hard at 16, right? Oh, it was the sun and the moon and the stars. I'm sure everybody does. At 30, I was a completely different human being. There's that. But what can you say about why it didn't work, why it didn't last, given that you wanted it probably too?
I think I thought I wanted it, so I was fighting for it because I didn't know anything else. That was the reason. Now, thinking about it, that was the best decision that we both ever made. But I have to thank her for a lot of things, because I had this savior complex, and I always thought about, started with my mom and then went on with her. But at some point I realized this is not a healthy way to live, to always think for someone else. So we had this beautiful relationship. We met up when we were 16, or I was 16, she was even younger. And we grew up together, and we did everything together. So it became this very stable unit, and we could both rely on each other. And those years are very crucial in your life. So you do a lot of shit with 16, 17, 18, 19. We both didn't, because we were so madly in love with each other that we basically decided to go the right way. So she probably saved me from a lot of shit I could have done in my youth because of all the struggles that I was going through anyways. And I think at some point it was mostly her realizing that maybe this is not it. She became her own woman. She became very confident, very successful. Everything I always wanted her to be. I was fighting for that. I remember so many sleepless nights because of struggles that she was going through. And to me, the only thing that made me happy was to help her.
So you were proud of her
I
becoming
was
that person.
so proud of her, and with that came also the confidence to actually think about this relationship and if this is something that will work or not. So although I was fighting it a lot, I did understand it because we were not a normal relationship towards the end. We were, I would say, more friends
Yeah.
than the people that are together. But because we both had a lot of respect for each other, but none of us could actually say these words. It was always, yeah, maybe, maybe not, maybe, maybe not. And I remember it was 29. I was in New York with three of my best friends, and I was walking through Fifth Avenue, and I had no Wi-Fi. But then somehow my phone connected to the Wi-Fi of the city, and I got a text from her. It was October, November 2019, and it was
before the storm. Uh-huh.
basically we were planning this whole family trip to Morocco a couple of days later, and we were talking about when she's going to join. And she sent me this very, very long message, and I still remember to this day how I felt in that moment, because it was a breakup message, but not really. So she was saying all these things, but not saying all of these things, but because I knew her, I knew exactly what those words meant. So I was remembering I was standing there in the middle of the street, looking at my friends, and my best friend came up to me. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I couldn't tell. I was too shocked, and I didn't realize what was really happening in that moment. At some point, I just showed him the text,
Yeah.
and he's like, "I'm so sorry."
Yeah.
I'm like, "It's fine. It's fine. I'll be fine. It's fine."
It's actually fine, but this moment it's emotional shell shock.
Yes.
Even if you saw it coming, even if you knew it
Correct.
was coming.
Correct. But that was New York. I saw the text, didn't react to it. I couldn't. I was mentally not prepared to go through all of that, so I blocked it.
Yeah.
I think I just texted something back like along the lines of okay or whatever. Then we kept communicating like nothing happened. I went on my family trip to Morocco. My family was like, "Oh, where is she? Like, we need to buy her this and we need to buy her that." I'm like, we're not buying her anything.
She doesn't like that color.
Yeah.
It's not her color.
Yeah, maybe not. So that was also the person in me that didn't want to disappoint my family. Went to this family trip, came back, and then everything crumbled because it became more serious and more serious. And eventually it came to the conclusion that we sit down together and we're like, it's not happening, it's not working. And I remember that conversation was probably a 30-minute conversation, which was surprising to me because we were together for
so long.
14 years, and it took us 30 minutes to end this. I was fighting it, but again, it is what it is. I remember that when I said goodbye, I hugged her, and in that moment I realized this will be the last hug of her, and I could feel it in that moment. So I remember smelling her hair. I just wanted to take everything in that moment to be okay with it and to release it. And so that moment was, we hugged for 2 minutes. I knew I will probably even never see her again after this. And that's kind of what happened, yeah. That was the last hug. I think we only saw each other once by accident years later. And I was going through my mom had some health issues. I had a bad day, and I saw her across the mall. I'm like, not today. I'm really sorry. I'm really over it. I could say hi, but I can't right now because of other reasons. So I just walked past her, and then I texted another friend. I'm like, could you tell her it's not personal?
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with her. I was having a rough day.
What you're describing is the last hug as us.
Yes. Yes.
I had a couple of those. But it also sounds like what you're describing is really almost like a divorce. It's the end of a marriage. Because at the end of something that long, you're not just letting go of the person, you're letting go of all that shared history and the idea that you'll be able to have those jokes with someone again. The idea that someone will remember you getting ready for your prom and how upset you were about how your hair looked that day, or how she felt about her best friend being rude to her that time, or...
Yeah, you go through so many memories together, and this whole concept of being with someone forever and that not knowing the person the next day is just very, very bizarre to me.
Yeah.
But that was the first time where I understood it, because I mentally was not ready to still have a relationship with her.
Yeah.
I think she might have been able to do that. I was not. So the only way for me to move on healthy is just to cut all cords
Yeah.
and not see her on social media, not talk to her, not knowing anything about what she does, because I needed that time to heal and to go through it without being distracted from all of that.
I could make a joke and say that's a very male response, but I won't make that joke because you didn't let me open the tequila. What I will say is, it makes me think about this. You know, so many of us are living definitely lives that our parents wouldn't have templated for us when we were little, and also, moreover, not lives that we would have templated for ourselves 10 years ago. At the same time, it's like society is going through this major shift, and what is normal is no longer normal. It's not really about your community of origin anymore. It's about like all the different key steps you made and where you are now. And so you clearly had this idea that you're with someone your whole life, but you also see what's left on the field when you're with someone your whole life. You didn't get to have those crazy years of abandon that are powerful and really satisfying in your old age, not just because they were crazy and because you thought you were cool, but because you get to know different parts of yourself, hopefully before you settle down. Meanwhile, I'm at the other end of the spectrum. I didn't get married till I was 35.
Oh, wow.
Right? So I left it all on the field.
Yeah.
And still ended up divorced, right? And I'm very happy with my life, and you're very happy with your life.
Yeah.
But it's always the road not taken. And now I genuinely don't know which is better.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
Knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
it's not as if you sound like you would go back and change it,
No.
because those 14 years were
Yeah.
full of care.
I would do it all over again. I don't regret anything. We don't speak ill about this relationship because we accepted that we separated the way we did, but it again taught me so many things that brought me to New York. I mean, at some point, sure, you have your family and your upbringings, but I had a second family that also taught me things that I didn't know. And that's something that I don't want to miss. And I still remember when people ask me, what was one of the best days of your life? It's definitely in the top 3 is my engagement party. I had a huge engagement party with like 400 people. It was a mess, but the best mess ever. It was half Afghanis and half like international Scottish, British, Lebanese, American people. Yeah. And it was a shit show before, because planning that and getting everybody together is intense, and making sure that every culture is being accepted and also validated. But now, thinking about it, to this day was one of the best days of my life. Now, it didn't end up as a fairy tale, but why being sad or depressed about something that didn't work out? Because in that moment, it was so good. Exactly. Maybe we would have not schlepped it until the end, because maybe the last 2-3 years were a little too long. Yeah. But other than that, it was great.
The last few bad years don't negate the good.
Correct.
And it's important to remember that. And by the way, most people don't think that way.
Correct.
It's very healthy, it's very peaceful.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that went on in your life at that time, which may be part of the reason you're peaceful.
Yeah.
Your father passed.
Correct.
And when was that in all of this?
So it was when I was, I think, 20, and I was 4 years into the relationship. That now ex met my father. They loved each other. When it was his birthday, he never celebrated his birthday. For us Afghans, older Afghans, they don't really care about that. It's just a number. She came with like a birthday cake and candles, and he had to blow them out. So she made him, like she cracked him a little bit in that term. So they had a very loving relationship. And it was, when I was 20, it was 2 days before the engagement party of my brother. And I was actually in Lebanon, in Beirut, on vacation with my ex-girlfriend and her family. So we entered the hotel in Beirut, and I'm a big fan. I don't know if you know, do you know Haifa Wahba? She's a Lebanese singer, has a couple of good hits, and I saw her big poster in the hotel lobby that she is having a concert 2 days later.
Okay.
I'm like, oh my God, it's my dream. I want to see Haifa in person. Yeah. At that point, I was the happiest person on this earth. I came to Lebanon on vacation with my then girlfriend, her family. Haifa Wahba is playing the next day. So I was in the hotel. I was just on cloud 9. Everything was just perfect.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of the night, her father came rushing into our hotel room. He was like, yeah, please pack your bags. We're going back to Germany. And again, I was very young, so I did not really understand what it meant. And I just asked him, like, why should we go back? He's like, no, it's not a big deal, but your father's not doing well, so we have to go back. In that moment, I knew something was off, but I didn't want to accept the reality. So I didn't have any follow-up questions. I just accepted what he said, packed my stuff, and I was trying to block that thought that all I was thinking in that moment is like, but I wanted to see Haifa. So packed our bags, rushed out of the hotel at night. We had no flights to Germany. So we were at the airport. He was like going through different airlines, getting us tickets. And I just felt numb. And at that moment, I realized how good I am at this, because you could have said anything to me. I would have not felt anything. So 2 hours later, the flight to Germany happened.
Self-preservation is a powerful thing.
Correct. And mind you, my dad he already passed away 2 days prior. So
and he couldn't tell you.
He couldn't tell me, and also in our culture, I don't know if it's the same in Indian culture, but in my culture, you don't you don't transport these kind of news over the phone.
Oh, okay.
So you never say somebody died over the phone. You will phrase it differently, or even not say it.
Or not say it. Okay.
Yeah. So they did that to him, and he obviously he's a European man. He's like, I'm not accepting this answer. Either you tell me what happened, or we're not coming back. And then they told him eventually, and he accepted that this is not what we do, so he didn't tell me. And we had a very funny relationship. We were all like, there was this banter back and forth between us, so we were never those lovey-dovey son-in-law, father-in-law. So I remember the first time I got scared was when we entered the plane, and he really made sure that I'm okay.
Yeah.
He's like, do you need water? Can I get you some food? And that was the time where it's like, shit. Something is wrong, because he's being so nice to me, and I didn't like that.
Yeah.
I just wanted everything to be normal. Like, I was mad at him being nice in that moment. But again, I blocked it. We arrived. It was a 6-7 hour flight, but it was the longest flight of my life. We arrived in Germany. It was a very awkward welcome. Her family came to the airport, and everything was weird. We took the car, went back to her house, and her father was out on the street unpacking his bag, putting some cologne on and changing his shirt. And I just looked at him and like, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, I'm coming with you. And that was kind of the last straw, because
that's not normal.
That is nothing about this is normal.
Yeah.
And I, again, just accepted it. I was young. I still had a little bit of hope. So we went to the car, drove to my place. I remember everything is very blurry because, again, we have great things in our culture, but also, I believe, very toxic and bad things. So we arrived at our apartment, and I just saw like 4 guys coming towards me, all in black. And one of them was my brother. And he just looked at me, and then he started to cry. In that moment, I realized what happened. So I cried as well. But there was no conversation happening. Nobody actually said something to me. It was just him, me. I was in his arms. I was crying. And all I wanted to do is to see my mom. I'm like, I want to see my mom. So went up the elevator. And this memory is still in my head as it was yesterday. So I reopened, the elevator doors opened, and just imagine an ocean of crying women in front of you, the hallway left and right, all like me being that son that doesn't know, and he just, right. It was like in those Bollywood movies, but a bad one. And I felt the pity of everyone in that moment. Everybody felt so sorry for me. All I just wanted to do is grab my mom and be sad and kind of understand what just happened.
Yeah.
So everybody was yelling and screaming. I was walking down this hallway. It appeared to be the longest hallway of my life. At some point, I saw my mom. Obviously, she was not doing well. So I hugged her. We both cried. Again, nobody told me what happened. So I just assumed. After 30 seconds, somebody grabbed me, took me to my room, and started to undress me. I'm like, what's happening? Yeah, like, get this shirt, get these pants, because I had a pink shirt on and like white summer trousers.
Yeah, you were on
I
vacation.
looked very different than these people in that room.
Yeah.
So they made me change, and then like we go downstairs to the guys. In that moment, I just did it, but now thinking about it, that was very odd. So
Surreal,
we
yeah.
went downstairs, and then the same thing that happened with the women happened with the guys. And I was sitting in the corner, everybody was staring at me because it already happened two days ago, and I was the one that just found out.
But to this moment, no one has said to you,
No.
your father is no more.
I assumed I knew what happened, but
nobody
there was
said
no
the words.
conversation about it. And I just sat next to my brother in that moment. Although he's my twin brother, he's 5 minutes older, and he really wants to make sure that I know.
Yeah.
I was sitting next to him, and in that moment, I felt like he's a big brother because I was just sobbing, and he took me in his arms, and I was there for hours, sitting there with strangers or people I don't really know. Although my one sister is locked down in their bedroom, the other sister is serving tea to others, and my mom is in the corner not talking. All I wanted to do is be with my family and not with some strangers, because that's what the culture does. So that was a very traumatic experience overall, because that went on for probably a week.
Yeah, memories keep coming.
Correct. And the scariest moment was when everybody left. Like after a week or two, when people stopped coming, and it was only me, my brother, and my mom, because my sisters were already out of the house. And that was the moment where we realized, oh shit.
What is life now?
Yeah, this actually happened.
Yeah.
Everything changed. And that was the moment where me and my brother just accepted the responsibility that we are the man of the house now. All the responsibilities fall on us, so we better prepare. And yeah, that's when everything changed, I think.
I'm at that age now where so many of my friends' parents are dying, you know, of old age. And my experience with grief is I had a boyfriend who passed away when I was 20. And so I had all sorts of thoughts on, you know, on ambiguous grief and on performative grief and on people's expectations of your grief. But the thing that sticks with me over time is a quote, and I don't know who it comes from. They were trying to help, but it stayed with me, and they said, "We are all children until our fathers die." And you're describing you and your brother knowing that you're the man of the house now, the men of the house now. But you became the caretaker for your mom.
Correct.
So was it an immediate descent into depression for her when he passed? And by the way, how did he pass?
So he probably had the best death that everybody could wish for. His heart just stopped beating. So they went shopping for like a suit for my brother for his engagement, and he felt a little tired, so he went back home, and he was sitting down on the sofa. And usually when that happens, you get very hot and everything is very loud, so he turned off the TV, got rid of his shirt, put it next to him, and then he just fell asleep. It's like you feel very, very tired. That's how doctors describe it. And
That is the most peaceful day.
it is very, very peaceful. And my sister and my mom, when they went back, the door slammed because of the wind, and he didn't wake up, and they were like, okay, what's happening? So after like 5 minutes, my sister got a little worried, so she went and like looked at him and checked on him and saw that this is not okay. So obviously she called the ambulance, and she did everything she could in the meantime to try to save him, but he was already dead for like an hour. It was just sudden, and from one moment to the other, he passed away. But now thinking about it, it was kind of the best possibility for him. He had no worries, he had no pain, he was not suffering, and yeah, it's all about perspective.
What does Afghani culture tell you about death?
I mean, depending on how religious you are, but in Islam generally, we live in heaven, so my father was someone that was living his life very consciously. He was a man of his word. He was respected by the entire community. So I feel like at some point he also thought it's his time, because he was talking about death a lot the last couple of years of his life. But I think because he had a good life, fulfilled life, children, wife, I think he's in a good place now.
What do you personally really believe happens when we go?
I think we are all an energy. I think your body will remain here and you will be buried, but your energy never really disappears. And that's what I believe. So I believe I wouldn't call it maybe a past, like a past life or a different life, but either it transpires to an object or another human being, or I think you never really die. Your energy never really dies. It always stays with you. And that's how I feel about my dad. I can feel him every now and then. And that's also, I believe, a beautiful way about thinking about stuff like death, because it's so final. But if you have a little bit of hope, it makes things so much better.
This is the gift of living in this age
Yeah.
for social media and for all of that, because these are conversations I would have had with individuals
Yeah.
back in the day, but it never would have been something that I could find on my phone, where a Hindu and a Muslim are having a conversation and basically would have the same conclusion.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I would have had to have that individual conversation with people. Do you really believe there's a gate marked H-E-L-L? Do you really believe there are 40 virgins? Do you really believe
yeah.
your soul goes and says, Mama, the next day?
Yeah.
What do you believe, right?
yeah.
And when you really get down to the intellectual part of it, most people who are curious, and probably anybody who's following you, is more intellectual than that.
Yeah.
And so we all believe it's some sort of form of energy. It gives me comfort to believe
Same.
that that energy gets reborn as a human, because I like to believe maybe I knew my daughter before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Nobody
Yeah.
knows.
Yeah.
And it's comforting to at least admit that.
Yeah.
There'd be a lot less horror in the world.
Very much so.
Right.
It's also so final. Somebody dies. Okay, that's the end.
That's the end. It's
That's
not
the end. But it's
We
not
know
the
it's
end.
not
Correct.
the end.
It's the end for your physical, like for your body, maybe, sure.
Yeah.
But the energies, they're floating energies all over the world. And I'd also believe if you meet someone and there's this instant connection with someone you've never met in your life, and you feel like that's your best friend, your missing best friend,
Yeah.
that has to say something.
Absolutely.
There was a past relationship. There was something up, because energies, they exist.
Have you ever had one of those moments where you could really point to his energy being there, where you felt it?
I did. There are a couple of things which also led to me being here in New York right now. At some point, I weirdly saw like a combination of numbers all the time, and I thought that's odd. And I'm not that superstitious, so to me, it took me a while to actually do some research and think, okay, maybe this is a sign, so let's
Well, your German side needed the science.
Correct.
Yeah.
I needed the science behind it, but I woke up in the middle of the night. It was like 3:33. I watched a video. I stopped it at 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Everywhere I looked, I saw the 33, and at some point I'm like, okay, let me check out what this number means.
Yeah.
So obviously it has a lot of meanings, but it's also an angel number, where somebody's watching over you. That's kind of the meaning in a nutshell. And I took it and ran with it. I claimed this number for myself. So a lot of odd things happened afterwards, where it was more proof to me that this number is something that protects me. Moving past that, I always knew, okay, if this is my favorite number, what will happen when I turn 33? So I was looking forward to that. The whole thing in my life was, I want to turn 33. That's the most important year of my life. And it was the most challenging, most rewarding, and most meaningful year that I ever had in my life. I understood that something defining is not always a good thing. It is maybe a lot of sadness and a lot of trauma, but it will get you to a different stage of life. And I think I needed that in that moment. That was the year where everything with my mom happened, and it got very, very bad during that year. And I got so close to my mom, and in that year, I was living with her. I moved back to her apartment, and we were going through all of that together. And at some point I thought, wait, this is the year that maybe I should apply for a job in New York, because that's maybe something that that would work. If not now, when then? I did it. I got the job. Obviously, I'm here.
So your mom fell into depression after he passed.
Correct.
And then fell into memory loss.
Correct.
So when you went to live with her, I'm assuming there was no question that was what was going to happen. It was a traditional family. You're the only unmarried child. Child? 30-something?
Yeah, let's say child.
How did you feel about it, going into it not knowing really what it would even mean?
It was just what felt right to me. I started to do some research on what is happening, because this is not a depression or something that you could usually just explain with a very normal thing. So I went to a couple of doctors and got some like different opinions about it. And my mom, obviously, she has dementia, but dementia is a disease you can't really prove that easily. It came back, the results came back that she's suffering from very early dementia, which on one hand is a very good thing because we caught it very early, but on the other hand, we right away knew our lives will change after that. So dementia is it's this big monster. You don't really, there's a lot of research, but not a lot of things you can do about it. So you can try to push it a little bit, but you can't really heal it. So that was the time where I knew, okay, things will change very, very quickly. How can I make this better? So I decided to spend every day with my mom. It started with silly TikToks. She didn't even know what TikTok is, but I'm like, hey, let's do videos together, because it was kind of our thing to bond. And she was not a big fan, but at some point I told her, I'll make money out of this. She's like, oh, okay, let's do where the camera. I'm like, oh yeah, that's how you get brown parents. Just connected to money.
And at the time you're working in tech sales.
Yes, I was working in tech sales, and I had no intention to do anything on social media, but it was my vessel to cope with everything that was going on in the world, but also with my mother. And I was also bored at home. It was the COVID times, and after, we had nothing to do. We couldn't do anything. So it was me, my phone, and my ring light, and sometimes the actress that is my mother, where we kind of made funny, silly videos together.
Do you have a favorite that you made with your mom?
Yeah, I actually do. It's another trend that we do, but part of the trend was her hugging her and showing a lot of affection. In brown households, that's not really what you do, and I had to teach myself to hug my mom.
Aww.
Yeah. And once I got over that bump, I did it all the time.
Good.
My
You can't
siblings,
stop hugging your mom.
until this day, can't really do it.
Really?
Yeah. It's all like they do it now, but it was, I don't know why, but it was very weird to us. My mom was never a hugger. Neither was my dad. So
Do you hug your siblings?
Good question. Maybe sometimes, like very rarely.
Do you understand that you need to start and you need to make it really aggressive and weird?
Yeah,
you need to
maybe
make
that's
it
a
weird.
good challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You make it weird.
I think the weirdest will be my older sister.
Please do.
She's very not a hugger.
Yeah, but you have to do it, and you have to say, if you don't hug me back, I will sniff you.
Yeah.
Just keep.
That's a good challenge. I'll put that on my list for my videos. I will even film it.
I mean, I do that to my kids. It's
a
just
good
going to be
exposure
worse if you
therapy.
don't hug me back.
You're right.
Anyway, so
I'm
go
not sure
on.
about my brother, but yeah, in that particular video, I was like giving her kisses and hugging her because it was part of the video.
Yeah.
And then I just realized, wait, this is great, because we learned how to be more connected to each other because we were living with each other. I was with her all the time. She couldn't be without me. And at some point, I kind of replaced, I was the second husband.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I thought that's very weird. So I was fighting it. But then I realized it's not that weird. She just needs a person that she can trust and that she can rely on. That's all she needed.
Yeah.
And I think I gave her that. So one of the biggest blessings of my life is now thinking about how she's doing now, and that she doesn't really remember me, is that I spent the last 3 years of my life taking care of her in a way that I now can say I was the best son that she could have had in that time, in that very challenging time. And even if she every now and then remembers a little bit, she will remember that. I was close to her. I gave her love. I showed her affection, and that's something that she didn't know. It's not part of our culture. It's not a part of her family. And I hope she will always have that in her heart, to know that she had loving children that gave her that security and gave her that feeling. So that makes me feel better.
You're going to make me cry. My goal was to make you cry.
Yeah, I'm a tough cookie.
The reason is I don't want my kids to ever take care of me. But I love how much I already see that they want to. My son in particular. If I'm sick, which happens, once every year and a half, suddenly he'll go and he'll start clearing the table himself. Suddenly he'll start telling his sister to put on her pajamas. Suddenly he'll go and one point took a blanket and went and laid it over me, and I said, "You are a boy. You are a little boy. You are not to take care of me." But it's just something as a mom, the idea that a child wants to take care of you shows you raised them right. But then you don't want them to.
But also, she kind of saved me in that time because her disease started when I was going through my breakup.
Yeah.
So going from that time of where I was missing that person that needed me, going
you were needed
to a
now.
transition where I was needed again.
Right.
Maybe it wasn't the healthiest way, but for me that was my way to kind of cope and deal with what I was going through, because I focused on her solely and tried to make her feel better. And we usually in our brown family culture, we don't really talk about emotions and feelings, not in detail.
You don't unload like
but
that.
But I felt like she really wanted to at the end. She asked me so many questions about like my breakup and my relationship, and also trying to fix it. And that's her way of opening up to me, trying to show that I'm safe with her and I could tell her whatever I felt like. But in that moment, I just turned it to, let's make sure she's good. Her favorite thing was to cook for me. Obviously, I'm not hungry all the time, but I made it a point to always show her that I'm happy about that.
Right.
So she woke up in the morning. It was during COVID. Obviously, I was working from home or at her home. So she brought me my coffee.
Right.
She thought about what she could cook. And in the beginning, I was annoyed when I was in client meetings and she was running around in the apartment, like give me coffee. And she wears a veil and she was like, without the veil, I'm like, Mom, people can see you. And then at some point I realized there's nothing to be annoyed by this. And I'm so happy and grateful that I switched it. And I told my manager, I'm like, hey, this is what my mom goes through right now. If there's anything happening, just know this is the reason. Because why tell her?
Yeah.
Tell them. So then he became friends with my mom. He's like, hi, Mom. He's like always like through the camera waving at her because he understood what the situation was. I made her feel comfortable. And yeah, we had like a laugh every day. That was the goal.
What was that phrase, your version of Shadomneata?
Mardom Chimega.
So, two things. Number one, I'm picturing you on that first Zoom where she shows up and she's not wearing her headscarf. And that's the bubble. The thought bubble sticks out of your head, right? That's number one. And then number two, it sounds like you both just gave each other the purpose that you needed in the pandemic.
Correct.
And got closer. So thank God for things like that.
Yeah.
I lived with my parents for 7 months in the pandemic with 2 small children. I would wake up most mornings and they were in their bed, which is a beautiful thing. When else would it have happened? When else would you have been able to get that close with your mom, right? But now let's move to the next phase. So how do you go from taking care of your mom to spinning your handkerchief around the world? How did that happen?
As I said, after the breakup, after all of that, I looked a little deeper into my life and my thoughts and my desires and what I want to achieve in this life. And one thing I realized is I can continue this whole concept of it is more important what people think than what I actually want to do. So I always had like a hand for videos and editing, but I never posted anything because it was something that I didn't even think about. And starting to work for this big tech company, I was thinking, hey, maybe I should try this and see how it works just for the purpose of sales and research. And I think the second video got a lot of attention. And I was like, wait, this is easy. We can do this. I kind of understand it now. And the TikTok algorithm is a beast. So it's not something that everybody gets right away. So it taught me a lot. And then it kept going on and on. In the beginning, it was solely for storytelling purposes. I was always try to tell a story, whether it's about life lessons or love or heartbreak or whatever it was. And at some point, I think a year into this, I was at my friend's place and we were all playing poker together. And again, sisters, brother, I did not lose a lot of money, which I did. And I was so annoyed at that day because it was like the second time I was playing poker. Everybody was making fun of me. And my favorite thing in the world is to annoy my friends. That's my specialty.
Is it?
And for them, the most annoying thing was TikTok. And because I was starting my TikTok thing and some videos went very, very viral, and they were like, You can do whatever you want, but not when we're around. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, let me take this little nugget here.
You said challenge accepted.
Yeah, challenge accepted. So they were playing poker and they were very into the game, and I was shooting TikToks in that room just to annoy them. And I remember there was this tissue. I remembered like this little Albanian dance that people do, and I loved it. And I learned the steps, and I told my friend that was winning big time. I'm like, hey, you need to do a little break. This is more important. Take a video of me. And he actually eventually did. He started to film me, and I did this little dance with my handkerchief, not thinking anything of it. So I filmed it. I never used it. Poker night was over. And then maybe a week or two later, I looked for it. I'm like, okay, what song can I connect to it? So I did some research. I'm like, hey, this is a good remix of Western music and Bollywood music. Let's put it together. Wait, there was this quote that I actually saw that goes well with it. So put everything together, posted it on TikTok, not thinking anything. At that point, I reached like maybe every now and then I got 1 million views, but that was rare. It was more like 10 to 50,000 views. Mm-hmm. And then I woke up the next day. I'm like, what are these notifications? And that video overnight reached like, I don't know, 15 million views. And I got 100,000, 200,000 new followers. I'm like, what is happening? So all these big creators, I eventually started a trend. So where people were using this little towel or a paper, using my song or that song and putting a quote over them. And they were tagging me in their videos. Like creators that are huge with tens of millions of followers were tagging me in their videos.
Tagging you because they appreciated it.
Correct. I'm like, wait, this is kind of interesting. What did I start here? And then I was talking to my friend. I'm like, hey, let's go outside and do this outside. I did the same steps with a handkerchief. Another quote. Okay, another like 10 million views. I'm like, okay, maybe this is actually something that resonates with people. So that became my journey. I started to travel the world. I was somewhere every week, whether South Africa or like somewhere in Asia or somewhere in Europe. And I just asked some random people to film me. I apologized before. I'm like, this is a TikTok. I'm so sorry, but can you just hold this? And they were filming me, and I was traveling with my little handkerchief, traveling the world, doing my dance, making people happy. Because even if I didn't do this and I posted something else, people in the comments were like, wait, where's your handkerchief dance? We want to see the handkerchief dance. Okay, maybe I should do it a little more often. So that's how it all started.
Did you decide up front, I'm not going to speak?
Yes, because...
Or were you like, I don't want to mess this up by opening my mouth?
Correct, but also that was also part of the course because I still felt a little vulnerable about all of that. Yeah. Social media, it's new, and I was scared that people would hate it or they would know too much about myself. That's why I didn't call myself Peyman. I called myself Pey.Pey. I didn't want anybody to actually know who the real Peyman is. And by the way, for everybody who's asking, because I get so many questions, why the white handkerchief and what is this dance? Once and for all. It's an Albanian dance that is also amongst many other cultures, but in particular those dance steps that I do, I took it from the Albanian culture, and they take a white handkerchief usually and dance with it. So that was my origin of that video. So it's just a cultural step. And the handkerchief is being done in Greek culture. It's being done in Arabic culture. So I think it's a very common thing. But just to give credit where credit is due, this was an Albanian dance tradition where it stems from, because I get this question every video that I do. So.
Well, and I love that because you just saw something beautiful about a culture. It stuck with you, and you did it. You did another video where you said, I'm not Persian, but every time I hear this song, I'm Persian.
Correct.
And then you're down on the street and you're doing that. And I'm listening to this song, and I had some Persian friends growing up, and I'm thinking, same. I'm Persian. Now, I'm not down on the ground doing what you're doing in front of a taxi.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a little Persian when I hear that song. And I think maybe we're all a little Albanian when we see you with
a little bit of everything.
Handkerchief.
A little bit of everything, but the song... And I thought maybe that's something that, for instance, the Daisy community, like Indians or people from Pakistan, resonate a lot with, because it's also that Bollywood song. But no, let me tell you, my barber, he's Greek. He's New Yorker Greek. And at some point, he started to follow me on social media, and he's like, bro, that little song and your little handkerchief dance, every time I see that, I get happy.
I get happy.
And that was so interesting to me, because in the beginning, I thought it's maybe an Indian thing, but it's really not.
It's
people from
universal.
all over the world, for whatever reason, love when I play this particular song and dance with my little handkerchief, and there's a little quote over me. It makes their days, and I am so appreciative of that and so happy that it resonates with people, because I never knew that this could be a vessel.
I mean, apparently it was meant to be.
It was meant to be.
When I think about your TikTok, it just made me happy. And when I thought about sitting down with you today, I was thinking about, we both had that same experience of traveling all over the world alone, not using our real name. And my big lesson from it was something different. My big lesson was, everyone's the same. Everything's the same. It's a powerful thing to know at a very early age, that anywhere you go in the world, any city you go to, what are the men going to say? We stand for family and community, as if other people don't. The women are going to have the same fears. The children are going to have the same dreams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What have you learned from all this travel?
Well, good that you say that everybody is the same. There's a German saying, if you translate it, it means everybody cooks with water, which sounds odd when you say it in English, but it makes a lot of sense when you say it in German, basically meaning that we are all the same. We do the same things. We have the same fears. We go through very similar traumas, and most of us have a big imposter syndrome about something in life, whether it's work or whether it's your personal relationships. So what I learned from that is that when I posted those videos, traveled the world, that I'm not by myself with this. There are so many people in the world that have this one thing that they struggle with, and they just need someone that can relate. And so the biggest learning for me was to connect to these people in ways that I could also discover myself. I was, for the first time, allowing myself to feel all of these things. So those last 3 years were so healing for myself, because it is not the most common thing in my culture as a brown person to like cry in front of a camera. But at some point I'm like, I think this is what we all do. I went through hell and back. This is actually a sign that I'm so much stronger, because I can show you those vulnerable phases. And maybe if you, whether a girl or guy, someone older, someone younger, sees that, okay, maybe this apparently successful guy with followers on social media that lives his dream in New York has a hard time on a daily basis with struggles that feel very familiar to my struggles. Maybe it helps me to accept my struggles in a better way. So that was one of the biggest learnings that I had, just to make sure that my vulnerabilities are it's not weakness, it's actually a sign of strength and power. And sharing that with the world made me so much happier, because I could see it was helping others.
What's frustrating is it's such a universal lesson that vulnerability is the thing, right? It's so universal. It's so obvious to us.
But you don't accept that when you're young. You're kind of in your own head, and you have to go through your own struggles in order to understand and accept that this is how the world works. But thankfully, I came to a stage where I'm like, fuck the world, fuck everyone else.
Except your followers.
Except my followers. I love you guys. But they are not making you happy. Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah. Nobody's
worried
worried
about you. You're this one person in this world of a billion people. So why make it all about yourself? You're not that important. So, hey, let's focus on your own happiness, whatever that means. And that was the biggest learnings, because in my culture, as a now over 30-year-old guy, social media and me dancing around the world is not the most common thing, and there's a lot of judgment. People in the beginning, when I didn't have followers, they were like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
It's
brave.
Yeah, people still do that. But now, at least, I have some followers, so every time people actually have that argument, I'm like, I'm helping people, and I really don't care about that opinion, because I love what I do. It's not because I earn money or become rich out of that. No, it's a passion. It makes people happy. It makes me happy. It's part of my identity. And looking back, this was the biggest learnings, because there was so much shame in the beginning, and now the shame is almost gone. At this point, I take it and run with it. If somebody makes fun of it, okay, let's make fun of it together, because
Almost,
not entirely, almost. I would say 98%.
because there's this quote that they say, someone said, I don't explain myself to people who love me because they don't need an explanation. They know where I'm coming from. And I don't explain myself to people who don't love me because they don't want to hear the explanation.
Yeah.
So I just don't explain myself.
Yeah.
But you have to go through all of those years of wanting to explain yourself, being afraid to explain yourself, muzzling your actual life and choices because you don't want to have to explain yourself and because you can hear everyone's judgment to the things you haven't even explained yet. And then get over that hump and start dancing with your handkerchief.
And start dancing with it.
And
yes.
feel really good about it, right? So you're doing it because it feels good.
Yeah.
And the side effect is that it's taken off and the internet loves you.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good side effect.
What do you want this to turn into?
I take it day by day. So I don't have these huge plans of this is my plan for next or the year after. But the biggest promise to myself was if I don't have fun doing any of this, I will stop it tomorrow. So number one, I'll always try to make it late. Number two is obviously at some point if I could reach more people and actually create this into like maybe in-person coachings or be a speaker at events and kind of share my story all around the world, that would be the best case scenario. But there's no pressure. I am very happy where I am. I don't need to get to the next step because this is already a dream coming true.
Usually at the end of a podcast, I like to do rapid fire questions.
Oh, wow.
Because it's good. It keeps you on your toes.
True. That's it.
So what would you be doing if you weren't doing this?
I would be staying at home, being married, having 2 children.
What have you learned about social media that you didn't expect at the beginning of this journey?
People can actually be nice on social media too. I thought it's this hateful platforms where people just spread very negative things, but it also helps a lot of people and they take it as a safe haven for their own thoughts and they're trying to find a community. That's very surprising.
Do you get a lot of hate on social media?
I don't, and I'm so happy about that. I'm way too sensitive. My biggest fear was to get all these haters in these comments, have stalkers, people like being just awful to you and your family. And thankfully, none of that is happening, and I hope it will stay like that because that was my biggest fear, but it never happened. So I'm so grateful about the followers that I have because they are the nicest people on this planet.
You are only spreading positivity, but that doesn't necessarily inoculate anybody. My last question for you is this. What do you wish you knew about your dad? Because he did pass young. And would it change anything?
Yes and yes. And I ask this question myself a lot because I have a lot of regrets. When you're a teenager, you see things differently than when you're like an adult. So when I was a teenager, I didn't appreciate his wisdom. I was too cool for it. So I never really had deep conversations with him because I thought I knew it better anyways. So why listening to him? But now when I think about the way he spoke about things, how reflective he was, how well respected his opinion was, how funny he was. When he entered the room, he owned the room. And everybody was in awe because he was just this amazing energy to have around. So sometimes when people tell me they do see things in me that my dad used to do, I get so happy because my biggest regret is not sitting down with him and asking him all these questions about life and about struggles because I knew he would be possibly give me so much advice about things that I was struggling with. So that would be the biggest regret that I have, to be stupid at an age where you think you know everything better and not going into those questions. And I still catch myself having a moment where I am struggling and there are things that I can answer and I just need someone to protect me and be there for me. Someone else, like, sure, I have friends and family, but someone like a father. But then I think he isn't me, he's part of me. My father was a great person. He was funny as hell. He was very confident. He didn't give a shit about anything. And if I even reach 5% of that, I think I will be very happy.
We started by talking about that, generational wealth of a strong family. I think we're both very lucky because as we get older, to say that we only get better as we get more like our parents, not everybody can say that.
That's true.
Thank you for being a guest.
Thank you for having me.